read stories to find this. How much do you read a day?
Constantly, unfortunately. In fact, I'm feeling very stressed right now because I'm working on several different projects, and because I'm also acquiring. I acquire short stories for Tor.com and novellas, and I have I have limited slots for anyone at Tor books can acquire short stories.
Right.
3 freelance consulting editors, me and Vandermeer and Jonathan Strawn, and I don't think I'm missing anyone. And so we all buy stories. So they only have, at a certain point, there are only limited slots per year that, I've already bought like 8 stories this year, for next year. For 2019. And so, I can't, at some point they'll close and say, you can't have months. So I'm reading for that. I also have several novellas I've been reading and working on that I'm hoping that will buy. I have Jeff Ford we have a proposal from him, a pitch from him that he's working on a novella for me that's coming in April. But I have one that the novella program is separate from Tor.com. That's by Harris, and the books that come. You know about the novella program, I assume, all of you?
Yeah.
It was Twilight Pariah, God's Monsters, and The Lucky Peach.
I emotional heights on a
Murderbot. I think those are all novellas. Anyway, they've been doing a series of novellas like for 2 or 3 years, and they're very popular. They basically are kind of taking the Hugo ballot because we do so many of them. I'm working on. They have one that they're looking at. I have 2 coming out this year. One by Mona and Deep, which is coming out this summer, and then Orange Shadow, Priya Sharma, is coming out in the fall. And the one that I worked on that I sent to Lee Harris. They're treated like books, so they have to go books, unlike short stories, which you can online books, ebooks, they're print books. And so they're treated differently than online fiction. The online fiction the authors actually do get paid well, but also they get royalties because those are sold as ebooks. But they're treated at the get-go. So they have to do a profit and loss statement to see if they think they'll make money, right? So and I can't buy that without it goes through a committee. One novella I'm hoping to buy that they may make an offer, which is great. And one novella that I have waiting for a rewrite from the author to see if it works out, and send that on if it works.
Like right now,
so it's a lot of work. And also I'm working on the year's best, of course. I'm still finishing up 2018. I've got anthologies that came in at the last minute. And then I start rereading. And I have an original anthology I'm working on that's due in April, I think.
So how many stories?
Print anthology. Iranian, and which hasn't been announced yet. And I just got the first print pages from my really, really big ghost story anthology, all originals but 3 reprints for Saga that's coming out in the fall, or June, or I'm not sure, late summer, early fall. And I just got the proofs for that. I have to go over the whole thing. Still, that's over 200 words, I think. So, yes, I'm busy.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm reading. I'm reading or editing or online, unfortunately, too much.
Yeah.
So how many stories do you get, like, in a month?
Do I get many submissions? Not many. I don't solicit. I don't solicit many people. I'm not an open market, so I don't get unsolicited matches at all. At any given time, I have maybe 4 stories that I have to read right now, and I have to, people who I know send me a story and say, you want to look at it? I said, I'll look at it, but I don't think I'm going to have room for it, so I have to be really picky. I have 2 stories, actually, that I'm hoping to buy that are being looked at.
Oh, it's good.
One of them is going through an agent, which is a problem because legal doesn't want to deal with agents for, $1,500 payment. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not. It's legal right now. And another one another story that I'm hoping I'm going to find. It's like at another agent, but they're not going to make trouble. But I can't, but I don't get paid until I put through the stories. So until I can actually put them through, I can't put in. We have timesheets, even though we're not, that's not how we work. Fortunately, anyone who's a freelancer would have to do a timesheet.
Sure.
You get paid a lot faster than the writers. That's the only good thing about it. Once the timesheet's signed, I get paid within 5 days. But poor writers are waiting for months. And the contracts invariably go off someplace. And I have a writer who we sent the contract request in September. They finally they screwed someone, it got lost in the road someplace. Anyway, she didn't get the contract. We didn't sign the contracts till yesterday. Another month or two. So, it's good money, but it's a pain in the ass. If you're in a rush to get paid, you're not going to.
So, all I can think of are basic questions like, what are your criteria for what gets picked for each of your annual anthologies, and then how did you go back among those 10 and pick this one? When you're reading through stories, I mean, what is the picture interest?
When I read for the year's best, if I like something, I will give it an honorable mention. If I really, really like it, I'll give it an asterisk. When I finish the book or the magazine, I will contact the publisher and say, could you email me these story files? Because that way I can get rid of the book, I can get rid of the magazine, and I just have the files that I'm considering, a list of stories I'm considering on my computer. And that's when I go back to start looking, that's why I end up with twice as much as I need. When I add up the wordage, I check to see what the wordage of each story is that I like. And I usually end up with at least twice the length that I can possibly use, and that's why the rest of it's an elimination. That's why I'll read and reread and have to hone it down. I mean, right now I think I've taken one story so far, but it's because I published it. It was in, two stories actually. I've taken, a story by Michael Marshall Smith that was in The Devil in the Deep by Steve anthology, and I've taken a Joe Hill story that was in Light or whatever the heck it's called. But two and this one was, they were both supposed to reprints, I think. So anyway, this one was the one from anyway, he's got Joe Hill and Stephen King had original stories and the rest are reprints. And it's really, so I just committed to just acquired that. But other than that, I'll be reading stories, and I'm still reading. I have this anthology, I have collections where I have to read the original stories. My cutoff date was December 15th, so I came in after that to get it. But I still read everything not. Meantime. So I'm busy with that. And also the project on the Subterranean, that's a big project. It's an anthology. All the anthologies I've edited. And it's basically stories that I bought for different anthologies from the beginning. So, I want to get a good mix. I mean, there are some. I get certain writers in it who I've used over the years. It's really hard because I have like 3 or 4 or 5 stories I've published over the years. Magazine. And then I have to reread some of those stories that I don't remember that well to see if I can pick which one. I don't want any too many. But I've edited like at least a lot of original anthologies. So I'm thinking, I'm trying to pick stories, a good variety of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So that'll be out in 2020. But that's starting to, I don't have to re-edit them. They're all edited, thank you. So I don't have to edit them, just out. And some of them I can't do now. My mainstream publisher and the sub-rights department is impossible to deal with. So if that's the case, I won't use the story.
So do you have, you have a subset of genres that you prefer the most, or do you?
I just like horror these days. I mean, I'm not as hot about fantasy. I mean, although I love stories in all the different genres and subgenres, but I do like horror a lot, and I've been trying to get more into science fiction. I've been buying science fiction. Do it. I hadn't for a year because I was concentrating on horror, and I'm buying more science fiction now.
I guess what I meant, like, within the horror genre, because that's what. Like, is there a particular style or setting that you like the most?
No. In fact, well, I mean, there are settings I enjoy, but it doesn't mean I'm going to buy a lot of stories because you don't want too many stories in one setting. I love stories in the Arctic or Antarctica. And I kind of like, I like stories in places where you go, in circles, but that's not, the story is not where it takes place, it's a combination. And I'll never, and I stopped, years ago when there were so many zombie anthologies out. I mean, the first time, I said, I never want to read another zombie story. And yet, then the rebirth, really interesting stories. There's no can't be making action by the point of view of characters in different places.
So when you read,
I don't like. There are things I really hate. That I get sick of. Children of peril. Couples that go into a haunted house and get screwed up, or go someplace and they're miserable and their relationship falls apart and everything's horrible. And they're usually British. They're usually in England. There's some good ones like that. I mean, I won't say, well, I'm never going to buy them, because I do buy them. But I get really tired of it. It's tiresome. It's like,
I just read some Darcy Coates.
Darcy Coates? Who's Darcy Coates?
Yeah, I just read Darcy Coates. She does a lot of haunted house kind of. I guess she's really popular, but that's exactly what she writes.
Oh. No, she writes stories. I never heard of her.
Yeah, she's on Goodreads Best of the Year list or something like that. Not exciting.
She writes short fiction, because I don't read that many novels every year.
Yeah, she does a series of novels.
Oh, if she hasn't written any short fiction, I probably wouldn't know her.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, then there are people who I think are overrated, who I will not mention, because this is good. But I mean, there are writers who I know. I get their books, their publishing sent me the book reading. I read one or two, and I was like, I don't like this person's work. I don't know if I want to continue trying to read it. It's boring.
Right. Well, we were talking about your the intro to The Best of the Best and the novels that you recommended, and it is we're probably not going to have to discuss which monthly selections for a long time. Just we have to go pick through your recommendations and just do.
Well, yeah, those are over 10 years of books that I enjoyed, of the novels that I did like for one reason or another.
So do you have any favorite authors?
Yeah, the people who I publish. And it's novelists or short stories. The short story writers, it's obvious. I mean, the people who I publish are the people who are my favorite writers. As far as novels, I don't read that many. I mean, I can't say, well, there are a few writers who I love all their stuff. Bill Gibson, William Gibson's work, I read everything. I love his novels. I like Paul Tremblay's novels. I love all of them. Josh Mallerman's I've liked a lot of most of his novels, at least four that I've read. Jonathan Carroll. I mean, I love his stuff. His hand, but so those are the novelists who I read all the time, and Pat Cadigan. But I don't read that many novels, so And it's rare that I like everything by one person. I've liked novels by someone, but I may not like another novel of theirs. So.
Right.
I would not like to judge that.
Yeah.
But I find it so interesting.
More prestigious than we have at school.
Are you still there, Ellen?
I'm here.
Andrew, you have her?
Yeah, she's not clear.
Are we completely?
I must be on
I was just saying, I'm sorry, John, you might want to mute your conference mic. There's a mute button on the conference mic. Oh, they're gone.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi.
Did you
Dan,
want
do
to
you have any questions?
Huh? Did you want to get rid of them?
Yeah, that's, I moved from DC to Boston. I'm in a group up here now, but, yeah, they were my old group, but that's the best beer bar in DC, but it's, not quiet.
No, it's kind of rowdy.
Yeah. But this is Dan Lehman Kennedy.
Hi.
He's in Maryland. He's a big fan. Dan, do you have any questions?
Can't hear him. Can you hear him?
Oh, no, not yet. You got a
We've
mic?
been muted. Something's going on. We can't hear you.
He might have been mic'd up.
He has his mic. I see him.
Oh, there we go.
And then,
Okay, we switched to a hotspot, so I think we're better.
No, we're not hearing you. Him.
oh,
Can you hear?
okay.
We hear the group, the beer. Oh, he's taking off the phone. Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So,
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Was he still trying? I'm sorry. What's your name?
Are you able to hear now?
Now I can hear you. Huh? Sorry.
Okay, it was. I think it was the mic on my headset was not playing nice.
Okay. So what? You had a question?
Well, I wanted to. First of all, I have in my hand here the fourth annual Year's Best Fantasy and Horror, which changed my life. As a just take the opportunity to say thank you, because that was 1991, and so much of the course of my reading habits have been shaped by that. I mean, that was like the year I discovered Thomas Ligotti. I read I think Kadekoya was in that anthology that year. I discovered the first time, and that opened up doors after that. So if you ever, I'm sure you don't have any doubts about the powers of anthologies.
No, I'm happy to hear it. I love it. I would love to, editors love to hear that kind of stuff. My job's done. I said it before. I say it. I'm a pusher. I'm a pusher of fiction. I want to push everything that I love onto readers so that they love as much as I do.
And that anthology also had the first time I read David J. Scow, which was the Not From Around Here. That messed me up for days.
Was that the refrigerator or something else? Refrigerator Heaven?
It was Not From Around Here. It was about the monster.
Monster story.
Now, 10 years of action.
Try it again. Hold on.
Okay, how much of, while you were looking back through the last 10 years, were you trying to sort of get...
I'm sorry, did I get what?
Like, that kind of represent a body of work as much as anything else?
Well, it was only 10 years. I mean, it was the 10 years of the Year's Best. It wasn't the Year's Best Fantasy and Horror. It was just... I tried to not... Well, I tried to take stories from every... And from Best Horror number 1 up to 10, through 10, which is what I was working on when I did it. I mean, I actually worked on 10 at the same time. I did not want to, I think I said this in my intro, I don't remember, but I've done Nightmares, Darkest 2 decades of modern horror, and then Nightmares, which was a new decade of horror, modern horror, for tacking on. And I didn't want to take anything from Nightmares. I had no overlap, so I had to. Now, not all the stories from Nightmares were in my Year's Best. A lot were. So I had to make sure that I didn't take anything from that book, even if I wanted the writer to do a different story. So, because I didn't want to. I don't want to keep repeating everything over and over again. But it was a juggling act. It's always a juggling act for whatever reason. And it was a juggling act. I wanted to get different voices, different writers. I wanted to make sure I had at least 2 stories. I had enforced representation of kind of the first 10 years' work. So, yeah, I mean, it was deliberate trying to do that. And the more times you do anthologies, like, and the more stories you're working with, the harder it is to juggle them. And like Echoes, my new ghost story anthology was coming out. 3 reprints, okay? But the rest are originals. It's like, I forget, it's at least... And that was really, really hard to figure out the take of the order of the story. To me, the most important stories as far as reading were... you just need to be very careful about what you want to do. And either it's next to it or the end. It's like... You want to juggle. You want to make sure you have juggle the length of the story. A lot of different things. And if you let me now, as an editor, I can't guarantee that the reader is going to read it again. But to know other way to organize, I have no way to know how they're going to read it. I have to organize it the way I think best. And this is the more stories you have to juggle, the harder it is to figure out exactly go well with this. Are the 2 stories like that, they're too similar in the same place, or should I put them together? You want to do it in order. You want to have if you have a really long story, you want to put it like a third of the way through, or at the very end. It depends. Yeah, it's all a juggling act. You make the table of contents after you have everything in front of you. I'm not sure that answers the question at all. Did it?
No, I think it answers. How you look at a decade of. Well,
I did find that I think I found more stories that I liked in the last 5 years than in the first 5 years. I just those stories that stayed with me, and because I guess it kind of just turned out.
I will say that I was really happy to see in the writing school make the last cut, because that was one from one of the early anthologies that really stuck with me too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the first time. I mean, I knew who he is, and I knew who he is, and that was the first story that I read that really knocked me out. It was like very different in a lot of ways. Not writing, but the idea of what. And I thought it was terrific.
My reactions to it was, that's kind of a study in the difference between a horror monster and a fantasy monster, even if it's the same.
Read some questions over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me over there?
Yes.
Okay. My question is whether you've noticed differences in putting together an anthology over the years, whether that's because of changes in publishing or changes in format with e-readers and technology, since the time that you started putting these things together, and how your process of putting stories together is today.
It hasn't changed. I mean, when reprint anthologies or original anthologies, or both?
I think both. I was just thinking if there was anything you noticed about the changes in the way people read, or the things that people like. And maybe the answer is no. Maybe it's just kind of constant over the.
Yeah, I haven't noticed that. I haven't noticed any change. I do find. I mean, what I'm finding, and I find really interesting and happy. A happy circumstance in the last 5 years, there are more people from other countries who are writing, publishing in the United States than in writing. So there are more people. There is a more diverse horror. I can say horror and science fiction. Starting with science fiction, that we get the horror.
We should be able to meet her.
I don't think. Me, publishing hasn't changed that much. It's always been a hard sell to sell, and still a hard sell. publishers come and go. Someone will publish me for a few books. Drop. They won't want to do another one. And then another publisher comes along and says, okay, I'll try it. I'll do it. So, it hasn't changed to me. And as far as electronic versus print, it's just a delivery system. I don't see any different than that. I remember when I started doing websites, when I started doing Omni Online, and then Event Horizon and Sci Fiction, everyone was saying, well, no one will read anything under, did we just lose them? Their face went away. Anyway, are you still there? Hello?
Yeah.
So we muted on mic, but we saw
Oh, okay. Well, and people would say, well, no one's going to read anything over 1,500 words. And I said, that's bullshit. If they're going to read something because I like it, they're going to continue reading it. And I just thought that was bullshit. And so I've always published novellas online. I mean, either people are going to read them or they're not. It's not going to matter whether they're 1,500 words or 20,000 words. If they are engrossed in the story, they're going to read the damn story. And so I don't find that, I mean, I always found that a really stupid thing to say. Or to believe that people aren't going to read longer things. Yes, we do. I mean, I'm in the middle of reading a very long nonfiction article. I mean, it's taking me, 2 days to read it, and I have to make sure I don't close my computer or I'll lose it. But, I'm reading this long-form article, a nonfiction article, and I'm finding it engrossing, and I'm going to continue reading it. Just because it's long doesn't mean sometimes I'll skim things, but this is really engrossing, and I want to read the whole thing. It's same with fiction. You're going to read it. If you like it, you're going to continue reading it. So I don't think things have changed all that much in that way.
Right.
Bob? Do you have a question?
Nope.
Oh, so I had a different way of phrasing the question I asked you earlier. So if your favorite authors are the ones that you've published, who among them have you published the most?
I published, let's see. Well, some people don't write enough stories. So that's a pain in the neck, So, but as far as people I've published a lot of short stories by, Jeff Ford, Lucia Shepard, Pat Cadigan. I've reprinted a lot of Brian Hodges' story in the last 5 years. He's been writing since 80s. I mean, I remember his first novels came out from Del Abyss, and I wasn't that impressed by the novels, and I don't remember him as a short story writer much until about 5 years ago. He suddenly started clicking and writing fabulous short stories and novelettes, and he's been doing it ever since. Terry Dowling from Australia, I've published a lot. Reprints and originals. Priya Sharma, she's new, so I haven't published that much by her, but I've published several stories, and I reprinted a lot of her stories.
Yeah, I think in Darkness, I think it was a Pat Cadigan story about, I forgot
the Passion?
Yeah, that was amazing.
That was an Omni originally. The vampire with the crucifix tattooed on his chest.
Yeah, that was so great. It was so pretty and nasty.
It's an Omni magazine. I love that story.
Yeah, that was awesome. I've tried to look for other stuff of his, but I'll try to look for some more.
Yeah, she writes good science fiction too. Let's have to publish more. She'd write more. I like Liz's work, but she doesn't write short stories enough. But when she does, they're usually really good. Let's see, I'm thinking, who else have I published a lot? Laird Barron, I've published a lot. Nathan Ballingrud and Kelly Link, when she was writing short stories, I published a bunch of her stories.
I have another question. Have you seen much in the way of a growth in kind of non-English language horror?
A little bit. I mean, don't forget it has to get translated. That's the problem. There's more Japanese horror coming over here, though. I can see that, and there are more. So it has to be in English. It has to be in translation. So that's still a problem. Ken Liu was doing that. I mean, he's been amazing translating a lot of Chinese work, science fiction, and he's helped a lot. And there have been people who have been putting a push to try to get more international science fiction and fantasy. Not as much in horror, but there was an online. I think Jeff Vandermeer was trying to push that, and Levi Tidar. They had a website that was pushing it. It's tough. Because basically you have to get them translated. That's the problem. When I was at Eurocon in Kiev about 10 years ago, before Eurocon, there was a a book exhibit, some kind of book convention. And all these people were coming over to me and Eileen Gunn, who had nothing to do with publishing in the United States as far as novels. We don't work for publishers. And they're saying, how do we get published in the United States? How do we get published in the United States? All these people from mostly Russia, but other places too. And we have to get your work translated, because we're not doing it. Not enough people in the United States can translate. You have to have it translated and then send it over. When I was at Omni, I published a couple of Japanese stories that were really good. They were sent to me translated by I can't remember if the person was British or American, but they sent me the two translated stories, and they were terrific, and I bought them. Now, I will never commission a translation because I commissioned, a Russian translator approached me when I was at Omni, and she gave me, I guess, summaries of like 5 different Russian stories by different writers. And I had to pick one. It's like, okay, this sounds interesting. But you can't tell from a summary what the story is going to actually come out like. And when she translated it, and I hated it. I mean, I published it someplace. I had published in one of the anthologies, I think. But I did not like it, and it taught me a lesson. Don't ever commission a translation. You can only, because you have to pay them. If you're committing to a commission work, you have to pay them. And I'll never do that again because it's not, there's too much likelihood that it won't be what I want.
Would you be in a position to commission a translation for an established, foreign author that you've?
No, these people were established in Russia.
Oh, really?
I mean, they weren't
I guess that's what I meant.
They were published authors in Russia or Soviet Union at the time, whatever it was. I can't remember.
Right.
No, I won't. I wouldn't do that because I still have no idea. I don't personally like Stanislav Lem, and I just find him boring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I published excerpts at Omni, and what I found when I was at Omni, there was a European science fiction anthology that had been published by Daw, and those stories were so dated by the time we got them. I mean, now it's faster because of the internet and everything, but at the time we got those European stories, they were so dated. They were like pale imitations of American science fiction, which was where science fiction was happening at the time. And it was just boring. All these boring European stories from all over the world, all over Europe rather, Germany, France, the Netherlands, and they were boring. So the problem is, now it's better now. I mean, you can get contemporary writers. There are some writers who are doing really well here. Thomas van Huvelt, who is Dutch, I believe. He has had his first novel he translated it himself, Hex, and he changed.
Oh, yeah, right.
And he
That's
changed where it was taking place in upstate New York, so it's still the same culture, which was great. I didn't read the original because I don't think it exists in English. I'm not sure, but he did a fabulous job of translating his own work, and he changed it. And of course now we're getting a lot of Scandinavian crime novels and, Let the Right One In and all these things. Right. It's happening more now with that, with the Breaking the Dam, the girl with the dragon tattoo. And a lot of crime shows are from Scandinavia or from England. I watch a lot of them. I rent them if I can, and even some from France. So I think because of the internet has helped in that way. Mm-hmm. It's gotten things moving more. But, unless you have someone who's willing to translate in advance and then send the work out, no one's going to commission a translation. We can't afford to because there's too much chance it'll be bad.
Yeah.
Unless someone's fluent. And they'll, and they trust even if the problem with translation is it's not just word-to-word translation. You have to be a writer. It has to be fluid. I mean, I remember Bruce Sterling, there was a story, Soft Clocks. It was soft. I think it was published in Interzone, and it was offered to me at Omni, and I hated it. It was just really clunky. It needed a complete rewrite, and it just wasn't. Well, I didn't like it anyway, but I think Bruce massaged it. I think with Bruce, either that or Lou Shiner. I mean, if it had come straight from the author, and the translation would have been really awful. And it was fine, but it wasn't my taste. But you have to have a writer who can actually almost rewrite it.
Yeah.
A good translator.
I guess you have to have a good original work and a decent translator.
And I recall that during the days of the fantasy and horror anthology, there was a lot more work in translation, but it all sort of seemed to come from the fantasy side, as memory serves, and a lot of stuff in Spanish.
Well, there was much less horror. There still is much less horror in translation. I mean, now we get some Japanese work, but not, and we're getting some East Asian, because there are some East Asian writers who are doing really good work. Alyssa Wong and Cassandra Kaur, and they write really good horror. Usman T. Malik, who's Pakistani, he writes, and they write in English, you know, and they're really good. And Usman writes fantasy, and he writes science fiction, horror, dark fantasy. So there are more people who are doing that, who are international. I mean, Cassandra has been living in New York. She's moving up to Canada, and she's a game designer. She's an award-winning game designer. Alyssa, I don't know. I think she was in New York for a while. That's how I met her, and then she moved down to North Carolina. I'm not sure where she is now, but you know, they left their countries. If you stay in your country away from America, it's hard to get your stuff read in America. If you come to America and start meeting people, I mean, Alyssa, maybe both of them went to Clarion. I'm not sure. Alyssa definitely went to Clarion because she met me after she asked to meet with me when she came back and wanted me to tell her about publishing, because Clarion San Diego doesn't have an editor usually. So she knew nothing about publishing. So that's how we met. And Clarion San Diego and Clarion West have been encouraging foreign writers, you know, would-be writers to come. They've been bringing international students over. So that helps, you know, that brings a lot of new voices into the mix, and that's really important. So it is happening more in science fiction and fantasy and horror, but the horror, I mean, a lot of what I find, a lot of kind of folktale, mythic stuff to me is more dark fantasy than horror. It's only occasionally horror, and much of it to me is more dark fantasy. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's me. I'm not looking forward to my anthologies, you know, or for my best of the year. But there's some very good work out there from people who non-English, first English language speaking people.
So who should we be looking out for?
Priya Sharma's got this novella coming out, and she's got collection All the Fabulous Beasts is terrific. That's out now. You should definitely read that. I published a bunch of her stories on Tor.com and in some anthologies, and her novella is really terrific. I don't know when it's coming out. Actually, I think it's coming out in the fall. It's called Orm Shadow. Actually, there's going to be a cover reveal. Is that the cover reveal? I'm trying to remember now. We have a cover reveal coming, but I can't remember if it's Claire Cooney's book. Oh, it's Claire Cooney's. I don't think we have a cover for Priya's yet. But they're really, you know, and Claire Cooney's really good. She won I think the World Fantasy Award for her collection, The Bone Swans. And she's a good writer. She's a very good writer. Nathan Ballingred's got a new collection coming out from Saga. His novella, The Visible Filth, is coming out as a movie like in a week. But it's not called that. It's called something else. I don't remember the title. So that should be really interesting, and hopefully it'll bring him some fame and fortune. We'll see. And Laird Barron's really good. If you're looking, it depends on what you're looking for. You're looking for science fiction or fantasy or horror.
She said Laird Barron wasn't that great, so I don't know about that.
What?
If you saw St. Joshi just
he hates me too.
Self-published the book.
St. Joshi is useless.
Just shit on like all the top.
He shit on everybody except like the sycophants. No, yeah, he liked Laird until Laird #1 started, you know, wrote things for me and didn't like St. anymore because St. said nasty things about me.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, but he liked Laird until then.
Right. And Laird was also part of the, you know, let's talk about Lovecraft's racism.
Right. Yeah.
And
you can't deny that it exists.
Right.
Right. And I'm to blame. I changed the award all by myself. But yeah, sure. But anyway, Laird's really good. He's written one novel a crime novel that was good last year. Blood
Standard.
Yes, Blood Standard.
Right.
And I think he's got
His new one's coming out, I think, soon.
The
The
follow
sequel to that's coming out soon.
Yeah. But I like his horror better, but it was really good. It's a good dark noirish thing.
He's talking about tying them together too. I think at some point
The two books?
that the Blood Standard books are possibly going to open up into his horror world. And
Oh, really? That's interesting. Okay.
Unless I'm reading him wrong from the interviews that I've heard him talk.
I don't know. Maybe. That would be interesting. He's got some great characters. Yeah, I really like his work.
I really appreciated how in the Best of the Best, the John Langan story is probably Laird Barron fanfic.
Oh, it is, yeah.
but
I didn't think I realized that until John told me. But John's another one. John's a slow writer, but he's really good. His novel Fisherman was terrific, and he's a really good short story and novella writer. I mean, he's always late, though. He's late with everything. It's really, he knows he's always late, and it's like, I have to start nagging him about something already. Find out how it's going. You know, I like Gemma Files' work a lot, short fiction, and I really liked her last novel. I can't remember what it was
Experimental
called.
film, I think.
Yes, I like that one a lot.
That was awesome.
I don't like all of her stuff, but I love that one.
Right.
She's really good. I love her short stories. Livia Llewellyn is fabulous. Read her collections. You know, she's got at least two or three really excellent, creepy, very creepy, sexual, creepy collections. She's worth reading. She wrote a novel that I read that I thought was quite interesting that she can't sell. It's it's an expansion of some of her stories, which if you read her stories, some of those stories, you know what, it couldn't sell. But maybe someday it will, but she has to write something else. But she's really, really good.
It's a shame because she's so good at that, like, psychosexual monster fucking
Right.
and see kind of
Incest and stuff. But that's why she can't sell it. The novel. So, but she's planning, I think, to rip it apart and maybe use pieces of it and do something else. Maybe create novellas. I don't know. And I know I'm missing people. I'm just blanking. Well, I love Kelly Robeson's fantasy, and The Human Stain won the Nebula Award. It was like, it's gothic horror. It's really gross.
I just heard about that.
And that's online. You should read it. It's on Tor.com.
Stained, right? Past tense?
Stain, S-T-A-I-N.
Oh, really? Okay, like Philip Roth.
Stain. And she has a novella that came out that's gotten a lot of attention last year, Gods, Monsters, and Lucky Peach, which is hard science fiction and alternate history combination. It's really, really good. You know, and it'll probably be on some award ballots. That's worth reading. Stephen Graham Jones, he's terrific. I love his stuff. I love his story. Mongols was terrific.
Yeah, Mongols is interesting.
I love Mongols. I thought it was really great.
Yeah.
Take on werewolves. So, there's a lot of great writing out there. Great writers and people who've they maybe have been writing for a long time, but they've only really become more, in the horror consciousness in the last 5 to 8 years.
So how much, before she passed away, which I never knew until I looked it up after reading the Magpie story, how much of Tanith Lee's work have you published in the past?
Oh, not much. I mean, I published, Terry and I published a lot of it in our various anthologies, our fairy tale anthologies. We had a lot of stories in. And in our mythic series, she's done a few of them. So, yeah, and she was in, the last thing that I think I published of hers was in Queen Victoria's Book of Spells. She had a story in.
Wow.
Yeah, she wrote she revived along with Angela Carter the fairy tale, adult fairy tale thing.
I think the first thing I read from her was in the 80s. She was in the Weird Tales reboot.
Oh, yeah?
Magazine. It was a story called The Unrequited Glove.
Oh, okay. I remember the title. I don't remember the story really, but yeah.
Yeah, great story.
Very good. Yeah. Tanith was terrific.
Yeah.
Some people from England who I really like. Carol Johnstone is writing really great stuff. She writes mostly horror, and I have a science fiction horror story coming out from her in a few months on Tor.com. She's really good, and Alison Littlewood, I think her name is another one from England, and Nina Allen is really good. You know, there are and Lisa Tuttle. I mean, she's been writing really great stuff for years. She's American, but has been living in England for 30 years or something. So yeah, no, there are people from all over the place. Terry Dowling, and Kathleen Jennings is really promising. She has a story that we publish on Tor.com, and I'm hoping to buy a novella by her. She's an artist. She's known more for being an artist, but she's been writing too. You know, she writes. Her art is like silhouettes. She does a lot of silhouettes, and you probably have seen it. It's been on a lot of. It's been on some cover art. Angela Slatter is really good. She's from England, and Karen Warren does really good horror. So, you know, there are a whole bunch of people from all over the place doing really good work. You know, so when you see all these things, and you know, that's who I have to pick from various anthologies. Like, if I have to pick, you know, stories from all these people who I've published, it's really tough.
Right.
Because some people are going to be left out. Dale Bailey does really good.
I have a question about, in terms of like short. When I was at World Fantasy this year, I was introduced to a lot of horror poets, like John Edward Lawson and.
I'm sorry, you introduced what?
To a lot of horror poetry.
Okay.
I had a really fun conversation with Linda Addison and John Edward Lawson. And do you get to delve into that as much in your work?
I see it. I mean, I read it for the year's best, but I don't really, you know, I'm not concentrating on it. I do think that horror and fantasy poetry is much better than science fiction poetry. Science fiction poetry is too specific and too based on things, you know, so it's harder to get a really kind of poetic poem from science fiction. I think most science fiction poetry sucks, but I think there's some really good dark fantasy, and horror poetry. But I look at it for the year's best, and that's it, you know. For a while, on Tour.com, we had a poetry. April was Poetry Month, and so a couple of years I commissioned poems or from people. I got one from Neil Gaiman once, and I think I got one from someone else once, but Jane Yolen probably. She writes good poetry. But, I mean, I don't concentrate on poetry. Linda Addison's a really good friend. But, I like her poetry, but I don't read that much except when I read it for the year's best. Oh, Goblin. What was it called? It was Goblin something. It was a website that was terrific, that had wonderful, I kept Goblin something, I am blanking on the second word, but it was a really good poetry website of dark fantasy. It was really good, and it's probably still around, even though it's not updated for years. You're gone, you know. I can't hear you. Were you talking or not talking to me?
Oh, no. We're just laughing, but I muted the mic so that
My 3-year-old
the
is,
restaurant doesn't
my
get
3-year-old's crying at me, so I muted myself.
Goblin Fruit. I think it was called Goblin Fruit. Anyway, if you can find it, if it's still online, it's a good website for horror, dark fantasy, horror poetry. See, I'm expecting a cat to jump on me anyway.
So is there? I guess it depends on how much exposure you have to the authors. But are there some authors that you actually socialize with, and you know them better than others because some you haven't read much of their work, or how does that work? Like,
yeah, I mean,
from that work as
some writers I've become friendly with over the years. I mean, I'd say 99% of my friends are writers or editors. So I become friendly with a lot of them, and that's really great to hang out with them. And there may be people I only see once or twice a year, only at conventions, but I consider them friends. So yeah, no, a lot of people are, and sometimes, and it's interesting to see who becomes famous and how they react once they become famous, and if they change at all. And I'm friends with George R. R. Martin, and I have known him, you know, since since Omni. I mean, he was published by Omni before I got there, but then I published a couple of his stories when I was there. And we're always friends, and he hasn't changed at all. I mean, he calls me up. He texts me. I say, don't text me. I don't have my phone on. You know, you're texting me on my landline. And he just won't remember. And his crew, his, like, his minions say, stop texting her on her landline. Email. I said, you can email me, but I don't have my telephone on. I only have my cell phone on when I'm meeting someone in the city or when I'm traveling. I do not use my cell phone. So you texting me is not going to do anything. I once got a text when I was visiting my sister in Connecticut at dinner. I got this text. I had no idea who it was from. It just said, do you want to have pizza? And I was like, oh. And it left the phone number, no name. So I Googled, and I was like, well, it's some phone number in New Mexico, but it's not any I recognize. I mean, and then George called me like a couple of weeks later, saying, "Oh, I texted you while I was in New York." I said, "Well, I got a text from a number in Santa Fe, but it wasn't your number." So, and I was having dinner. I was eating in Connecticut, so I didn't get it for like a day or something. And it's like, stop texting me. Email me if you want to get in touch with me. But anyway, when he comes to town, we usually go to pizza.
That's hysterical. I think I was reading one of your notes, somewhere in your jacket notes or something, and I saw, so it never occurred to me when I was a kid that he had written Sand Kings in Omni.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I published that. I wasn't the editor. I mean, I was, Ben Bova bought that.
Yeah. And so I read something, I think I read it in some of your notes recently, and I saw his name, and I never remember the author, but I remember the title. And it was like this flash of lightning. George R.R. Martin wrote Sand Kings. And I was like, oh my God, because I had thought about that story a lot, and the name stuck with me, but I had no idea it was from him. Because, of course, now he's obviously famous because of Game of Thrones.
But when he was my boss for a while, and then he was promoted. Well, he was fiction editor, then he was promoted to editor, and I was assistant to Bob Sheckley. And he wouldn't let me buy horror because he didn't want to do horror, but he published Sand Kings, which is definitely horror. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of SF horror because they're aliens. Yeah, sure. But he wouldn't let me buy the monkey treatment, but I ended up buying the Pear-Shaped Man when he was gone, finally. So.
That was in Darkness, right? That was a great story.
Pear-Shaped Man, yeah.
That was awesome. The other one by, I forget her name. It was a zombie story in India, in Darkness. Set in India, in Calcutta, I think.
Oh, Poppy Seed Wrights. Calcutta.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Very short, but very, impactful.
Yeah. Joyce Carol has a lot of good horror, too. I mean, Joyce, she's been in a lot of my anthologies. She's extremely prolific. The thing with Joyce, if I approach her about doing a story for an anthology, even though I haven't sold it yet, she'll either she's interested and she'll send it to me right away, but I haven't sold the anthology yet. So that's okay. And so a year later, it's I still haven't sold the anthology, or it's not going to come out for another year or two. It's like, uh-oh. Or else she won't respond, at all, if she has no idea. So, that's funny. It's either immediate, oh yeah, that's a great idea, or nothing. And Richard Kadri's been writing really good short stories. I've been following up with his Sandman Slim novels.
Right.
But see, when I met him in the 80s, and he lives in San Francisco. And at the time, I knew him as an artist. He did collage art, which I still have some of his art. I had no idea he was a writer. He had gone to Clarion with Pat Murphy, and they got together there. And they were together for many years. And Pat was a writer, and I didn't know Richard was a writer. I just assumed he was an artist. And then he sent something, I think he sold something to Interzone, which I reprinted in Omni, and then I bought another story by him from Omni. And then, so he had a novel. His first novel was one of the Ace Specials, the second bunch of Ace Specials. Metrophage, I think, was his.
I haven't read that yet, but I've heard about it.
It didn't do well. I mean, and then he did a couple of novels and nothing happened, and then he stopped for a while. And then his Sandman Slim novels took off, which was great. They're fun. They're a lot of fun, dark
fantasy. Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
But he also writes really good horror stories. Gotten some very good stories from him. That was in Dark Nightmares. It was also I reprinted it. It was originally in the Doll collection.
Okay.
I think.
I've only read one or two of his short stories, but yeah, I've read pretty much all of his Sandman Slim stories, or Butcher Bird, which is pretty good. And
I don't think I read Butcher Bird.
Yeah, that was not my favorite of his, but it was still pretty good.
He's got a novel coming out that's not connected to Sandman Slim.
Yeah, he's done a couple of those, I think.
Yeah.
Some young adult novels. But yeah, he's a hell of one. I love him. Slim Hall.
Hey, Alan.
We're still,
Sorry.
no, we're open.
I have a different kind of question. What kind of advice do you give to folks that want to get into editing, and how has that field changed since when you started out?
Well, it's always been tough to get into, short story editing or novel editing. Really? Which? Or both?
Your niches, yeah.
I'm sorry, which novel, short story, or long?
Sorry, short story.
Well, it's always been tough because there have never been that many markets. As many markets there are jobs, and most of them are not in New York. Before I got to Omni, I was in book publishing for like 5 years, getting nowhere slowly. And Omni was my first magazine job. And I was lucky that it was located in New York and that I was able to get a foot in the door, blah, blah, blah. But it's really tough to get. Some people intern. I have people who read for me. They don't want to be editors, but they're, you can, if you want to be an editor, that's a way to work with someone if you volunteer to read for a publication. If they need readers. I know Tor.com had readers. They don't have anymore. I don't think they need them because it's not an open market anymore. So I think it's kind of tough. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure it's changed that much. It always was difficult to get into it. Basically, I think you went to wherever there was a magazine and said, hey, can I help out? And either for free or not, part-time, and just say, I think a way to start getting into editing is to read. Ask to read the slush pile, basically. And you get a feel for what's out there. Now, when I was in book publishing, my first job in book publishing was a sales secretary at Little Brown in New York, and they had a slush reader. They actually had a manuscript reader who that's all she did, which is like really, even then that was unusual, and that was 35 years ago, whatever. And she read manuscripts all day, and she had too much. She gave me some. I read some of them in my free time because I didn't have, my boss was only in 3 days a week or something, and I don't even know what I was doing for him, secretarial stuff, I guess. And so I had a little time, so I was reading novel manuscripts. Another way a way you can get in is like the science fiction book club I used to read for them. See, I don't think there are that many book publishers that take on freelance readers anymore. But when I was in the mid-'70s, when I was in book publishing, I started reading for, I read for Dell Books, I read for Ace Books, I read for the Science Fiction Book Club, I read for 20th Century Fox, you write readers' reports. And I don't know it doesn't teach you how to edit, but it kind of at least teaches you how to read a little bit and discern what's commercial and what's not, possibly. And also you just met people. You got into the group and you were able to go to parties and you could meet people who are in publishing, and that always helps. There's still some publishers that are more fluid. Tor is still very fluid in how they promote people from within. I don't know if when they're hiring or not. But, that's kind of how you do it, if you can. If you're not in a city where there's publishing, it's tougher. Although, so much is online now. There are a lot of magazines, online magazines, Uncanny, Apex. There are a bunch of Strange Horizons. You can volunteer to read for them, and I assume they need readers. I don't know, but I bet they do. And that's a way to get a foot in the door and to get a feel for what's going on. Even though you're not in the same city, it doesn't matter because it's online. So that could help. If you volunteer for magazines or online zines that you like, you just approach them and say, hey, can I read for you? Can I read slush for you or something? Mm-hmm. Or if you're a copy editor and have the experience, can I copy edit or proofread? Publishers will usually give you a test, a proofreading test or copy editing test. I don't know how the small presses, how the magazines hire people like that, if they do, or just they do everything themselves. But those are some ways.
Well, Slush Reader just reads through submissions and passes along things that they think
is any good. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. And believe me, I always said reading Slush is relaxing because they only need half a brain. Because, if something's at all decent, you're going to notice it. If it's not, you can just oh, good, I can get rid of this, I can get rid of that.
Right.
It was easier with paper, just throw it on the floor. Now it's like, reading online is harder because it's just bad on the eyes.
Yeah.
I read more online now, and sometimes I'll just download stuff to my Kindle app. But, if I read a whole novel, I actually did just read a 60,000 word novel online. It didn't hurt my eyes for some reason. I read it fast.
Yeah, I read The Terror, I think, on my phone. And got through it.
Yeah. So, that's what a slush reader does. They read all those things that the editor doesn't want to read. And if it's any good, you'll pass it on, though.
All right, so gatekeepers of sorts.
Yeah.
In the archives of Making Light back in 2003, Teresa Nielsen Hayden has a 15-step of different types of slush, starting from this writer has no functional grasp of the English language, through this is a really good story, but everybody's seen that movie. To buy this book. And
15, I would say it would be 5. I can't believe it's 15.
She has exhaustively detailed it.
I've read that 100 times. What's new about that? Why is it even being written? Why are you writing this? Seriously, something. I teach at Clarion Clarion West about every 5 years, and I don't say that. I try not to say that, but sometimes I think that. It's like, well, why did you write this? Aside from being assigned it, that's not the point. Because at a workshop, you have to write a thing week, so it's different. But it's like, why, that's a question that I think every writer should ask themselves. Why are you writing this specific thing? What compels you to write it? No matter what it is. Why there? Some others just say, well, what's the point? What's this about? Well, is it about anything?
The story prompt that got out of hand, or
what?
Story prompt that got out of hand. Yeah.
Well, if it's maybe. But even a story prompt is about something. The prompt could be about something, but sometimes it's just about nothing. Like, what's it about? The worst horror is when it takes you in the middle of a situation and it's just torture porn. I'm talking about fiction, not movies. And it's like, what's the point? So you got someone and you're torturing them and they're miserable and they're, and it's ugly. It's like, so what? Who cares? It's like, and that's not a story. That's a scene.
Right.
And you don't get that in science fiction. You don't get that in fantasy. You only get that in horror. That kind of setup. And it's a setup. It's not a story. What brought them here? Why are they here? What's going on? Why should I give a shit about? Why should I read this?
Right.
I've read torture all the time. It's like, I've read that before. It's like, okay, and now what? Why? Why is this being written? Why was this written? And there's stories that work. I know there are stories that are really tough and really hard to read, horror stories that are really grisly, and sometimes they work. And I have not ever tried to analyze why this one works and that one doesn't. Maybe I would do it if someone forced me to. I remember reading Charles Bukowski. I'm sure you know who he is. And his stuff he's not a torturer at all. He was like kind of a drunken poet who wrote novels. And I remember reading a couple of his novels, and I think they shouldn't work. Why do they work? It's something, and I could never figure it out. They worked. There was something about his language or his rhythm or something, and I'm not a writer, and I'm not a teacher. So it was really hard for me to figure out what made these words work together, and I have no idea why his work. I don't remember what specific work I read, but why it worked, although it shouldn't have. It seems like it shouldn't have, but it did, and that's really fabulous writing. But you'd have, as a writer, you need to analyze, well, why does it work, and why does yours not? Why does this other thing do you think doesn't work? I think that's useful for a writer to do. not only your own writing, but someone else's writing. Something you really love. I mean, that are similar. I mean, they should be in the same genre or the same something, so you can compare them. And then why is this one work and why is this one not? And I would like to. I would love to know the answer. I'd love to go to a class that someone analyzed this and say and hear what they had to say, because as an editor, I may not know myself because I'm not a writer. I'm not deep into the storytelling of that, and I'm not a teacher. I have taught workshops, but I always say I'm not a teacher. I do not how to. I can move the furniture around. I can see what you've got done wrong here, but I need something to start with. I need the work to start with. I'm not a writer. I cannot create out of nothing. I'm not a story doctor. Some people who are usually writers can figure out what's wrong with a story or a novel and excavate it and fix it, and tell the writer how to fix it. When it's that deep, I can't. I'm not good with novels. In fact, there was a novel that I was asked to look at by a writer who I really love. And I really liked the novel, but I knew it needed too much work that I didn't feel comfortable doing it because it has structural issues. And if I did enough novel editing, I'm sure I could get into it. But I do up to novella. That's just different. I mean, short fiction up to novella is different. Your structural problems are not as complicated as with a whole novel. And I couldn't do it. So I bounced it back to someone else. I said, I think this is good. I know it needs a lot of work, but I can't figure out what it needs. So if you want it, figure out if you think it's commercial enough to take. But I can't work on it because I don't know how to fix it.
It feels like, speaking
How often?
One at a time.
All right. How often when you're editing, how often do you get engaged in actually restructuring or seriously attacking the story? Or does most stuff come pretty packed?
I don't do the restructuring much. I mean, one of the stories that I've worked a lot on was A Human Stain by Kelly Robeson. And it went through like 4 rewrites. It's a novelette. What I do is I ask questions. If it's a story, it was something really powerful about it. It was interesting, and I really liked it. And I worked with Kelly before, but I had no idea what was wrong with it. So basically what I do is I'll go line by line, basically, and ask questions and say, well, what's going on here? What do you intend here? Tell me what's going on. And in the third rewrite, or after the second or third rewrite, I asked her a question, and it turns out I totally misunderstood something very important. And I said, well, that's not there on the paper. I mean, the virtual paper, whatever. I said, what? I had no idea this was going on. So she had to reconstruct it. She had to deconstruct and reconstruct what was going on. By the time we went through it 5 times, I had no idea it was any good. I mean, I liked it, I bought it, but I had no idea if it worked by that point. So I was really gratified when it won the Nebula Award. I was shocked that it even was nominated because it's horror. I mean, totally pure gothic horror. It's no science fiction, no fantasy. It's horror, But anyway, so I guess it does work. But, when you get so close to something and you work on it so much, after a certain point, you're not sure. So that was one that I worked. It wasn't the structure. It was a lot of this. It was very complex what was going on, the plot, and the interactions. And so basically, as I said, I ask questions. If I like something and I want to work with the person on it, and that's what happened with a novella that I'm hoping that I hope that the author agrees that she left out a whole bunch of stuff. When I ask, well, I don't, what's going on, who are these people, blah, 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 blah. She said, oh, I had a feeling that there were issues. It's like, yeah. It's like, where does this take place? It's like, but it's really good, but it's missing a whole bunch of things that I think she can easily fix, but she didn't put them in the story. And since I've worked with her before on short fiction, and I know she's published some novellas, I'm pretty sure she can fix it. If it was someone new who I knew nothing about, I would just throw up my hands and say no. If you can fix this. I mean, I may give them a general idea, like something, you're missing a lot of stuff here. It reads like a first draft if you redo it, but a new writer is not going to be able to figure it out usually. I mean, so I probably won't ask to see it again from a new writer, because I just don't think they're going to be able to fix it to my satisfaction. But if it's someone I've worked with, I'm willing to take the chance, if I think they can pull it together. And sometimes, as I said, I haven't edited that many novels, but I edited like 3 novels by Jonathan Carroll for tour and 3 novels by Paul Macaulay for tour, like about 10 years ago. And I've worked with Jonathan on a lot of short stories, and I've read a lot of his novels. I read all his novels, but when I edited the first one, to me, there seemed to be really big chunks of things missing, and I didn't know how he would do it. And what happened is it was very tiny tweaks. He did tiny tweaks, and it fixed the whole thing. And I was like, wow, okay. But none of his novels were that majorly, they weren't broken. They weren't broken. Same with Paul Macaulay. If you've got a broken piece of a work that's broken, for me to tell you how to fix it depends on where the break is and if I can see what's wrong with it. With science fiction, a lot of times when the ending doesn't work, it means that 3/4 of the way through you went in the wrong direction. But that's kind of a very big generalization, and it's only with science fiction. I found, So I don't remember what the question was.
No, that was really helpful.
I'll work with someone if I think it can be fixed, and I'm interested. If it's something that I think, okay, I read it once, I do not want to read it again, then no, I'm not going to want to work on it because I don't want to read it again. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not compelling enough for me to want to spend this much time on it and to reread it 2 or 3 times. If I buy it, I have to read it. I read it at least 3 times because I'll read it in the first read. I'll read it in a second for maybe if I have comments, and then so I can commit to buying it, either for an anthology or for tour.com, because I have to send it into production for tour.com. So it has to be in good enough condition for me to send it and say, this is not edited, but here. And then I do a line edit of everything, like a few months before I hand it into production, whether it's an anthology or short fiction or for tour.com. So I'm reading the story at least 3 times. So if I don't want to spend that much time with something in someone's world, it's like, no, I don't want to read this again. I can't bear it. I'm not going to buy it because I have to read it a few times.
No, that's fascinating. I'm sorry, Dan, I think I interrupted you.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to say, it seems to me very, very broadly speaking that when you're working, the shorter form you're working in, the structural problems are either relatively simple or they're intractable. Well,
it depends on how short you're talking. Let's say 5,000 words, between 5 and 10,000 words. If you've got a structural problem with 5,000 words, I can't even imagine how you could have a structural problem with. Well, you could, I guess, but you don't have a story. If you have a structural problem with 5,000 or less, then you have a real problem.
Right, you at some point you just have to.
And it should be pretty straightforward. There could be, there's not many ways the structure can go wrong. And that, I think that's shooting off my mouth. I don't know, but it seems to me that under a certain length, it shouldn't be that complicated a structure.
So I've got a question about the best of the best. This sort of circles back to what trends have you seen. It seems that, like, looking over the last decade of stuff that wound up in the best of the year, there were a lot of apocalyptic stories.
I didn't even notice. Were there?
and not just zombie apocalypse.
I know there were at least. There were 3 zombie stories, I think, in there.
Right. We got some zombie apocalypse. We also got like werewolf apocalypse and. Apocalypse. That was Little America, I think.
Was that a werewolf one?
You know what? Never said.
I don't remember.
But it's got the kid who's got to file his nails down and.
Probably. Yeah. Okay.
And also the one that I believe came from Poe is it was a Mask of the Red Death story. Which one? There was the first one in
Lowland Sea?
Lowland Sea, yeah.
Oh, that was Apocalypse, but it wasn't zombie. It was plague.
It wasn't zombie. It
It was
was
just plague.
right. So very broadly speaking, there's a lot of apocalyptic fiction out there. It feels like more than 20 years ago.
Not necessarily. Maybe those are just the stories I like best. I mean, I can't, no, seriously, I don't know. I didn't even notice, to tell you the truth. Now I have to go back and look. Oh, I have a cat. Are you going to come and join me? No. Jack, you want to join me and say hello? Come here. Come on, you big boy. Come on. Come on.
Well, that answers my question, which was, is that some? Is
It
that
wasn't intentional, let's put it that way, and I wasn't aware of it. Now I feel like I should go back and see which story.
Do you get a lot of feedback from your selections for these best ofs? Your people. I mean, I don't know if it affects your choices for next year. If someone says, too much apocalyptic stuff.
No.
Or that Peter Strong
give a
story
fuck.
sucked.
No, I don't care. It's what I like, It's like, what, I'm going to pick some story just because other people think that. In fact, there's a story that I didn't take because everyone else took it that I thought was fabulous, but I didn't think was horror. The Things by Peter Hamilton.
Oh.
Peter Watts, sorry.
Peter Watts.
I ended up not taking it for two reasons. Number one, everyone took it for the year's best. Number two, to me, it's not a horror story. It was from the Thing's point of view, and from the Thing's point of view, it wasn't horror. It was kind of life. So that's why I didn't take it.
Great story.
It is. So I don't know if you can see Jack. Let me see. He's over here.
Oh.
But if I don't, I have to keep an eye on him. I can't pet him without looking because he'll bite me. No, seriously, he bites me. If I miss his cues, he'll let me pet him, and then suddenly I'll miss the cue, and he'll take a chunk, And I almost got I was worried I was going to get an infection last weekend, which would have been really bad, because I would have had to run to an emergency medical center over Martin Luther King's weekend. But luckily it didn't get infected. It was the first time he actually drew blood. So I don't trust him to pet him without watching him. I call him Jack the Jerk. I love you, Jack. You're a good boy. Are you a good boy? Do I trust you to bite me? Are you going to bite me? Of course you are.
So if you're an amateur author, is it easier to get a short story published than something longer? I don't know if that's
You don't mean amateur, you mean new, right?
correct.
It's easier than getting a novel published. Oh, you mean shorter story? Well, it's harder. Yeah, I mean, I would say under 7,500 words would be easier than having a novelette to begin with, But if, on the other hand, if your idea is that long, you have to do it. But probably, I think there's more room for shorter stories for new people.
And is it often that a short story writer will or will not have an agent?
Oh no, short story writers shouldn't have agents. There's no reason to have an agent. They'll just get in the way. There's no point, and an agent won't represent you if all you do is short fiction, most likely. A few people will. Kelly Link had an agent, and who's tried and sold a novel, but she didn't have an agent. She got an agent who wanted to sell her short fiction, basically. But most agents won't take on short story writers, just if that's all they do. So yeah, you don't want an agent, and when your agent is to negotiate, there's no negotiations on short fiction. Here's the word rate, and that's it. If you're not sure of the contract, if you're going with someone who you don't trust their contracts because you just don't know them or don't know their magazine thing. You don't know their magazine or you don't know the publishing company, you should try to contact other people who published with them and get someone who knows contracts to at least look over the contract. You don't want to sign all your rights away or do something really stupid. I know people who should know better, who sold rights, and then we had an argument with the publisher saying, I'm sorry, but you can't do that. That's ridiculous. That the money would go to the publisher instead of to the author. It's not in this case, no. So yeah, you should be able to read a contract enough that you know if you're being screwed or not. But SEFWA and there are model contracts around. I think actually there's a model contract on the SEFWA site that is not useful. I mean, apparently it just was pointed out to me that that their anthology contract doesn't make much sense. There's a clause or two in there that are really bad, that don't work at all. But I mean, for editors, that basically is like, no, you can't do that. No, I'm not. I'm not giving you that contract. And no, no, you can't. But anyway, you should be aware of contract, but you don't need an agent. They said you won't get an agent initially anyway. Now, if you publish a bunch of stories and an agent sees them and said, wow, they're great, I want to represent you. Again, check out who the agent is. Don't just let any agent, you check who you're working with. I mean, see who they are, see who they represent, make sure they're legitimate. If you're not sure, talk to other writers or writer organizations and ask them. When you're starting out, you're vulnerable, you don't know what's out there. If you're writing science fiction, you might want to consider joining SEFWA. If you're writing horror, you might want to consider joining HWA. If you're writing mysteries, MWA, or whatever it's called. Because, they are helpful for that, for contracts, and that they might have model contracts on their websites that you can at least look at to see, well, this is what a contract kind of should look like, But no, you don't need it. You won't get an agent for short stories. I mean, who wants to represent someone who makes let's say you sell a story for $1,500. They make $150. It's like a drop in the bucket. Or no, it's 15% now, so I don't know, whatever that is. So.
I definitely read more horror than I do visual media, but as an editor, have you read a story where you thought, gee, I'd love to see this on like the small screen or the big screen, and see that visually rather than in written form?
Well, I read visually, so anything I read, I have to see anyway. But yeah, I mean, there are plenty of stories that I think this would make a really good movie. But, I mean, sometimes, over time, I've had movie people approach me and want me to give them, to suggest things to them. I said, sure, if you pay me. I'm not doing this for free. And actually, I mean, I got screwed where, I did do something for free, and it turned out it was never made, but the writer got money. I never got a cent. And the agent wouldn't have known, the movie person wouldn't have known about it if I hadn't mentioned it. So I learned my lesson very early on that, if I'm going to do anything for movie people, they better pay me for it. And I actually have a deal that's never going to happen, but with a legitimate producer who we have an email agreement that if I send them something and they make it into a movie or TV thing, then I get a percentage and a production credit or something. But anyway, and that was the closest thing. I mean, something was optioned, but it never came through. But I think that I would have actually gotten money. And I am actually named as a producer on the Internet Movie Database. If you look me up, you'll see I'm a producer. So anyway, what was my point? So I would send him the stories for my anthologies. Look at these. I mean, they could do the same thing, just buy my anthologies, In fact, in the last year, I've had 2 people come to me saying, I don't have the time to read your anthologies. They look great. Can you do summaries of each story? I said, no, you want to pay me for it? And he said, well, how much? And it's like, I don't want to do it anyway. It's like, I don't need the money that badly. Now when I was unemployed, I needed money. And yes, I would do that. I would write a paragraph, for a few bucks, $500 a month. And I'll write you little paragraphs of each story that I published. You bet. But, I don't have the time. I don't have the money to do this. And it's like, you think I'm going to do this for free? It's like, no. You have eyes. Read the book yourself. I don't get anything out of it. I get nothing. The writers do. Unless they buy the entire anthology, I don't get anything.
Those guys have interns to do that?
Huh? What?
Those guys have interns to do that?
You would think. I mean, well, they're low level. Well, yeah, and the big movie guy, the real one, I presume that's what they do now. I'm sure he has someone who does that because he's, I stopped sending him stuff because nothing ever came through, so I didn't see any point anymore. But he can, they have someone. And actually, I have an anthology that was done by Blumhouse, Haunted Nights with Lisa Morton, with a Halloween anthology we did for Blumhouse. So they're the movie people. So it's an imprint at Doubleday, I think. I lose track. And I'm doing another anthology for them actually. So they can see what I've done if they, But when I was at Sci Fiction, which was a sci-fi channel, every month we published fiction, all right? I even sent them sometimes. I sent them a note. Here's what we published this month. Did they ever do anything with it? They had first look at hundreds of stories, and they did nothing. It's like they're too lazy. They say they want it, but they don't want it. I once had a producer come to me, and actually he's a name. I can't remember his name now. I think I do, but I think he's a producer. And he said to me, we're looking for blah, blah, blah. And it was very specific. I said, I don't understand. You're looking for this, and you want to know if I can if there are any stories. Like, why don't you have someone write it for you? You know what you want. Have a writer write it. Said, well, no, that's not what they want. It's like, they're fucking idiots. Why they're looking for a needle in the haystack when they can create it themselves? You have the plot. Why do you need to look for the story that may or may not exist? Just write the fucking thing. They're fucking morons. I'm sorry, they're stupid. They really are stupid. Maybe not as stupid as they were. I don't know. This is 25 years ago, but they're pretty stupid.
Word coming out of that part of the world does not suggest that it has improved.
So, did you ever write, or have you written?
No, I have no interest in writing. No. That's why I say it's a different part of the brain. Richard Christian Matheson was a friend. I just haven't talked to him in a while, but I published him. We once had lunch. He said, "How can you be an editor and not be a writer?" And he said, "I'm a better editor because I'm not a writer. I don't want to rewrite anyone's work. I know, I can see. It's like I'm not an artist. I can't create anything to save my life. I could not create. I cannot draw." But if you have something in front of me, I can move it around. I can move the furniture around once the furniture's there and say, this goes well. I'm really good at putting things on my walls and seeing where everything goes, but I can't, but I couldn't create the art. I'm a really good photographer, but I'm not an artist. I can't create out of nothing. And, it's a different skill. And I have no interest in writing. Yeah. I have nothing to write about. I have nothing to say. And I admit that. I have no problem admitting that. That's not what I do.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, have you ever read a story so scary that you were worried about publishing it? Or anything controversial that you were worried about?
That way. Oh, yeah, sure. I've had stories that I have gotten flack for. I was accused of killing the industry. Oh, twice by the same person. When I published at was it Sci Fiction? What I didn't see was an answer to Tippy's the women men don't see, and Karen Joy Fowler wrote kind of this wonderful story that was. A lot of people, it was mainstream, but I felt it was kind of horror. It's about, it was really great, what I didn't see. It's just about a relationship, a woman who goes in Africa, and is studying gorillas, and it's a domestic thing. A husband and wife have a bad relationship, and anyway, Dave Truesdale accused me of killing the field. With this. It won and because of his belly aching about it won the Nebula Award. I was very pleased about it. Otherwise, no one would have noticed it. And then I also published The Goozle by Margot Lanigan in one of my anthologies, the Del Rey Anthology of Science Fiction and Fantasy. And that's about what happens to Hansel after Hansel and Gretel, and there's a lot of rape and stuff in it, and it's pretty tough to read. But he felt it was promoting pederasty. It's like, what? It's like, really? And again, he couldn't believe that Del Rey would publish this piece of garbage. And I don't know if it won any awards, but it was, it's been, I reprinted it a few times. It's great. And there were stories when I was at Omni that I didn't publish, that I regret not publishing, but I felt they would not write for Omni. Most of them were when I first started publishing, was a fiction editor when I was promoted. And I was worried we'd get in trouble. So I didn't take them. And some of them I regret, and some I realized I still wouldn't have published in Omni. They weren't the right venue. Like, that was when I did Alien Sex, because I used those stories that were published other places and reprinted them, like Dancing Chicken by Ed Bryant, which is about aliens and fist fucking, basically, which is a great story. But and that was originally going to be in Universe 10 or 13 that Marta Randall was publishing, rather with editing, and there were several stories I took that were in Universe, that I did take that were in Universe, whatever number it was. Silverberg had given it over to Marta, and Marta had kicked out a bunch of really provocative stories that were really good. And some weren't that weird. I don't know why. I mean, Flying Saucer and Rock and Roll ended up in my book, in the Omni, because for some reason, I don't know why they didn't like it, the publisher. But anyway, Dancing Chickens was in there, and that ended up in Light Years in Dark, edited by Michael Bishop. And then I reprinted it in Alien Sex. And I think that was in, wasn't that in Darkness? I think that was in Darkness, too, probably. Maybe. I'm not sure. And then there was Her Furry Face by Lee Kennedy, that I should have bought for Omni, but I was worried. Didn't, because I was afraid to at the time, because I had just started and I felt uncomfortable. I just started as fiction editor. And that's about a guy who's studying, I don't remember, some apes, great apes, but I can't remember what kind. I mean, I don't remember if it was orangutan or gorilla. And anyway, it's about this guy who's studying them, and she's talking. She can talk through sign language and everything. Anyway, I didn't take that. It's very nasty and really good. But I didn't take that because I was afraid. I just was afraid to at the time. That was in Alien Sex. And then All My Darling Daughters by Connie Willis, which I wouldn't publish now. She published in her collection, I think, finally. I'm sorry, I probably should get something else to drink. I ran out of water. Anyway, so those three stories are things that I thought were really terrific, but I didn't feel I could publish them in Omni. Now, one of them, Her Furry Face, I could have, and I should have, but the other two I still wouldn't have. So yeah, I don't remember what the question was, but there are things that were provocative, and and the thing is, when they were published, All My Darling Daughters got a really nasty review from some some Australian female critic in Science Fiction I might have been. Remember SFI? It was a magazine done by Stephen Brown from DC. It was really good. He was promoting the cyberpunks, and it was a really good magazine, a non-fiction magazine. And anyway, Yvette Rousseau hated this story, but it's really good. I mean, it's vicious. I mean, Connie can write really vicious stuff, believe it or not. Yeah, so...
The funny one.
There were stories that are and there's a story that I didn't take by Bruce Sterling that I really liked, but I felt... I mean, the thing is, it's really prescient, in a way. It was called We See Things Differently, and it was about a musician, and it was about terrorism. It was about a terrorist, a Muslim terrorist. And this was way before 9/11, okay? And I just felt that Omni, it wasn't the right venue. I felt it would promote prejudice against people. And I just worried about that, so I didn't think I wanted to publish it. And it was published in Semiotext. I think they did a science fiction issue, which was good because it was in a small venue that was specifically for this kind of stuff, political stuff maybe. And I don't regret that. I mean, I don't think Omni was a place to publish it. So, there are choices. The Power and the Passion, I didn't know. I actually asked my boss at the time, who was Catholic, a practicing Catholic who went to church like twice a day, how she felt about it. I mean, this was the one with the crucifix tattooed on the guy who was a vampire, who was a serial killer who, when he would expose his crucifix, he'd kill vampires, okay? So I asked my editor, my boss, who was the editor at the time, you know, how do you feel offended by this? And she said no. So I published it. We never got, you know, the things we got comments on, the stupid things we got comments on were, let's see, we published The White Plague we published an excerpt from Frank Herbert's White Plague, and someone complained that someone said shit on their deathbed, that they cursed. I'm thinking, are you fucking kidding me? I mean, they're dying. They can say whatever they want, and this is what offends you? And then Kenneth Lee's story, Snowdrop, which was in the Snow White Blood Red, we got a nasty letter by someone who said, how dare you publish this porn? It was like, I think it was, there was a lesbian in it. I don't even remember. I don't remember it being that sexual, but maybe it was. But it was like, this is for adults. What's your problem? I mean, it's like, really? You know, so that kind of stupid stuff, not the things that I thought were going to get us in trouble. There was a story that I published in Omni that I thought was going to get a lot of trouble because it opens with an S&M scene. And Kathy Keaton from Penthouse asked, are you sure it shouldn't go into Penthouse? I said, no. I think it's really good. It's fine in Omni. And my boss, a different boss at the time, who was another religious guy, he said, this is a terrible story, it's really boring. I said, no, you're just offended by it because it's got sex in it. It's like, it's a great story and I'm publishing, screw you, you know. And Kathy Keaton kind of backed me up on it. You know, she was the publisher of Omni. And was executive, whatever she was, I don't remember what her title was. And we never got any, no one said boo when we published it. We never got any negative, you know, I always thought for sure we were going to get like nasty letters about it. No one, nothing. So you never know it's going to cause controversy. You know, you can't think that way. And you just have to think, is it right for the venue? Is this right for what I'm publishing? You know, for where I'm publishing it, is it the right place to publish this? But you can't worry about, you know, you have to stand your ground as far as if you think something's really good and you think it's worthwhile publishing. You know, I mean, I was really glad that I was able to get Dancing. I mean, the thing is, Michael Bishop had turned down Dancing Chickens once, and I told him, "Oh no, you got to." I turned it down, but it's great. You got to take it. So because I said that, he reread it. He took it for his book. It was an anthology. And I remember Marta Randall, when Connie had won 2 Nebulas that year, and for Daisy and the Sun and something, I forget, for 2 of her stories. And Marta came and said, you really can't publish All My Darling Daughters now, even though she's on the inside? No, it hasn't changed the story. The story is really still kind of over the top. It was about incest. It's really ugly, but it's brilliant. And I said, I can't. I just, no. I don't think I can publish it in Omni. So, but I was very happy I was able to reprint all the things that I thought I couldn't publish in the magazine. I published in an anthology. You know. So that, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
So, I just want to echo Dan's comment at the opening that, I mean, your books are awesome. Darkness, I still haven't finished, even though this is our selection for the month. I still have to go back and finish some of the stories in Best of the Best. But I read Darkness cover to cover and so I couldn't wait for our session this month to meet with you and learn more about your process.
So what do you think
This
now?
stuff is just amazing. So no, I'm just saying. I love the fact that you're a good pusher on all this stuff because I think we're all junkies. I mean, we're like.
It's very hard to find a lot of good horror, so it's awesome to have these sources.
So, just saying that No, Bob was just echoing the point that you've been a great guide through all this stuff, so thanks.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And of course, in my intro, my summary of the year, I always try to suggest. I mean, I used to have pages and pages of my honorable mentions, and all my publishers complained, and so I gave in with the best horror and said, okay, I'll do the top. I can't remember if it was 50 or 100, and then the rest I just put on my web. I eventually put on my blog, but what was my point? It's like, so in the summary of the year, there are a lot of magazines I recommend, and anthologies and collections, and I don't mention things that I think are really truly awful. And the problem is I always miss things too. I mean, that's what's horrible. That like after production's finished or in the last stage, it's like, oh my God, I found this. Can I put this in? Can I put this in? I left it. It was under my couch, or the cat ate it and I missed it. And so I'm always missing, there are things that I find out about too late and that no one sends me. So, I mean, it still astounds me that publishers don't send me and they send things, this year is worse than ever. People send things like in the last 2 weeks. I mean, not these last 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of my deadline, the first 2 weeks of December. It's like, stop this, It's like, I don't, you sending me 50 anthologies at the last month. This is not useful. If it came out the last month, that's one thing. But these are things that came out throughout the whole year. Don't sit around and wait on these. Wait, would you please send me these things early? And don't send them at the last minute. Because it's less likely I'm going to have time to look at it thoroughly. I'll be skimming it maybe.
Have any hurt feelings from authors that feel like they got snubbed?
Of course. Everything. I mean, every time when I'm doing an anthology and one of my authors says, you didn't ask me to do that. When I said, I can't have you in every anthology. I have hundreds of writers. I can only fit 20 stories into an anthology. That's the way it goes. I mean, most of them do understand this,
Right.
But also be careful. Don't ever tell an editor when you're submitting that this is the best story I ever wrote. Because invariably it's not. Good writers who I've worked with many times, invariably when they say this, I think is the best thing I've ever written, it's always garbage. Really, I mean, it's horrifying. It's very sad. It's like, wait, what? Don't tell me that. If you say that, I know it's not going to be good.
Automatic reaction is, oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, it's going to be awful. Yeah. So that's.
Anything you've ever regretted putting into a best of?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there anything you've ever regretted putting into a best of?
Anything I've ever read, put into.
Regretted.
Regretted putting in?
Back.
No. No, only things that I can't use, like if I can't get the rights to it because it's the publisher. I mean, I was going to put in a China Mieville story a few years ago, and unfortunately it was tied up by his publisher. If I had to go to the sub-rights department. You have to go to the sub-rights department, you're screwed. If you have to go to the agent in a state, you may be screwed. Now, mostly for the best of the year, I don't have to worry about that. Estates, usually, I've only occasionally used stories by dead people when a story comes out, and it worked out okay. I forget. I'm trying to remember his name. Old California horror writer who's dead. I mean, who died. Anyway, he died young. I don't remember his name, but a story was published by him that no one had published, and I got that year, so I didn't have any problem with that. But generally, if you have to go through a sub-rights department, it's hopeless. What happened is I was able to, first of all, they take too long. If I'm making my decision near the end of the year, they take too long to get to it because it's like $50. This is what I'm paying. It's a penny a word. There's no negotiation here. So it takes very long. And then I was able to get the e-rights and the print rights. And then I realized, well, what about the audio rights? It's like, we can't give you that. We don't have those. And I said, well, I can't take the story. I had already paid them. I really was very annoyed. And I told China, well, guess what? I can't buy your story. And he said, I'm sorry, why not? I said, because you negotiated all your rights away to your publisher. That's why. And people do that with, when mainstream publishers do this. Most non-mainstream publishers do not. If you give those if you allow the publisher to control the reprint rights of your work, you'll never get published again. You'll never get reprinted because no editor can afford the time or the energy or the money to deal with the sub-rights department because they just don't give a shit. And you don't get the money anyway. It goes through your, against your royalty, your advance. So you never directly see the money. So, I tell every writer, it's like, anyway. China said, I don't understand. None of my friends have this problem. I said, because you let your agent sell your rights. That's why. So sorry. So, and occasionally, and I have a Stephen King story in number 4, Yours Best, but it's usually not worth the trouble. I mean, it's a pain in the neck. Because again, you have to, the foreign rights are separate from a different agent. And it's just not worth the trouble. So I won't buy a Stephen King story anymore for a print anthology. It's just not.
Even with the name, having his name on the cover isn't.
It's not worth my time because I can't get the foreign rights. If I can't get the foreign rights, the book will not sell to foreign countries.
Right.
My books sell to Russia sometimes. Every once in a while, I just got a Cyprus just bought a bunch of books. It's like, if I don't have the foreign rights, my agent can't sell those rights. Or the publisher can't sell the rights. Whoever controls the rights, my publisher or my agent. I need the rights for everything. And, otherwise I can't buy the story. So, yeah. So be aware that when you become rich and famous, be aware that, if you want your stories to be reprinted, you better make it clear to your agent or sub-rights people that you want this to happen and that, because we want anthology rights. I mean, I don't see why selling, to foreign rights, and then it has to be the right translation. I mean, for King, it was like, you have to use the same translation this publisher used. And then there are 2 publishers who have different things, two from the same country who were arguing. And it's like, oh, just screw it. Stop it. I don't want to care. I don't want to do the deal anymore. Go away. So, yeah, I mean, if it's too much trouble, why should I bother? It's not going to sell that many more copies. So, things to be aware of. Oh, and also, for all writers, you should have a literary executor. And it should be someone you trust, someone younger than you, and someone who knows what you want. Someone who's clear about how publishing works, who will not overprice your work so no one can reprint it. I mean, that's why Ray Bradbury's work for years couldn't be reprinted because, I can't remember the name, Don Congdon just held on to the rights like that and wanted too much money for it, so no one reprinted it.
Huh.
I mean, people who reprint, we don't have much of a budget for reprints. And we can't pay like $500, for one story. That's like a quarter of our total budget sometimes. So, be aware. Always have, when you start selling stuff, have a literary executor and make it very clear that you want your stuff to be reprinted. I mean, make sure that you know who they are and you trust them. Let's put it that way. And that's the fastest way to have a writer forgotten. If you can't reprint their work.
I'm going with
Oh my gosh. Sorry for the noise just then. Any other questions from you guys? Andrew or Dan? Any other questions?
I have one more question. So as I love the best horror of the year, but the single thing that I missed the most from the year's best anthologies is the introductory blurb that sort of says, here's what to expect in this story.
Oh God, I hated doing those. I mean, the thing is, I don't want you to know what the story is going to be about.
And I wondered if it was purely a matter of time, but it was a decision.
Jim Frankel used to write those. I mean, we had a packager. Jim Frankel put together the whole book because I never read Terry's stories and she never read mine, unless we both agreed on what something was horror and fantasy. So Jim put together the order, and he's the one who, I mean, with our input, wrote the intros to each story.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I hate writing intros to a story. You know, and also, why would you want to read an intro to a story? I don't want to be prepared. I just want to get into the story, and I don't want to know what it's about before I start reading it. I really do. Now, on the other hand, of course, Harlan Ellison did great intros, but he did, exegesis of everything. Yeah. So no, I don't. No. It's hard enough for me to write an intro. I have to write intros to every anthology, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard. It's easy when I can use my proposal. If I have a proposal for an anthology, I start with that as the germ of the intro. But then when I started writing one for The Devil in the Deep, I suddenly realized, oh shoot, I sold that without a proposal. So I'm starting from scratch. Like, oh no, what's this anthology about? It's like, oh no, so that was a lot more work. Now, is this going to be online someplace where, like a podcast? Do you know?
So, Andrew, I saw that you've been recording it, but we haven't mastered that technology at our end yet. So,
Actually, forgive me for not mentioning this before, but I did start recording it towards the beginning. I don't know if you're okay with that.
Yeah, it's fine.
We didn't have any specific plans for rebroadcasting it. I just kind of wanted to.
Although, if you're fine with it, Alan, we could always put it up on the Meetup app. I think that we can link to it on. So our group here in DC has a Facebook page.
That's what?
We have a Facebook page.
Okay.
And if you're fine with that, we'd be happy to post it there. But I don't want to do that without your permission.
I think it's okay. I didn't say anything too horrible, did I?
No, you're good.
It's on authors, I guess, that we prompted you for, but, those are your opinions.
There was more stuff about that panel.
And I did talk about the person who didn't like Jerusalem and what I didn't see. But, so what? They know. I mean, it's not like they're in the dark about this stuff. They know they're jerks.
Right, well, so maybe I'll work with Andrew offline to get that up, and I'll shoot you a note, and you can check it out. So, Dan, Andrew, anything else?
I'm good, thank you.
So, Ellen, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been
so incredible. Thank you.
Yeah.
So one of you's in Boston?
Yeah, I'm in Boston.
Are you going to be at Boscone? I'm going to be at Boscone.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, I was going to see Grady Hendrix there.
Huh?
I was going to see Grady Hendrix there. We're going to talk to him next month in the group, the book club that we've got up here.
Oh, okay.
We're talking to Victor Laval, I think, on Monday, and then
cool.
Grady Hendrix next month.
You're going to be there, or are you going to talk to him by Skype, you mean?
I'm going to talk to him via Skype, but I'm going to try to meet him while we're there. We couldn't get it together to actually. He was up for hanging out that weekend, but we just couldn't get it
Grady?
together.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
But yeah, if you're there, I hope to see you there.
Okay. Well,
I'll buy you a beer.
Say you know me. Hi there.
Lovecraft flavored beer here.
It's too far away, Elder. I see the
it's Elder Dweller.
Dweller Cocoa.
Yeah, it's from.
Sounds good.
It's from Revival Brewing. It's there in Providence.
Okay. Oh, all right. Sounds good. All right. So I'll see you at Boston.
I see you'll have to bring you one.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.